Washington is educating 131,956 students who don't speak English as their first language. 1,906 of them are right here in Wenatchee. Now, if I keep saying students who don't speak English as their first language, I'm going to lose about 10 minutes of my time. So I'm going to revert to an acronym, EBL, which stands for Emerging Bilingual Learners. You might be more familiar with other acronyms like ESL, which stands for English as a Second Language, or ELL, English Language Learners. I like Emerging Bilingual Learners because it acknowledges that this is a multicultural society, and English is not the only language spoken here. Now, I'm going to show you some data about our EBLs in the next 3 slides, and whether you think standardized tests are flawed or biased or good proxies for performance, it's clear our EBL students are struggling disproportionately in school. Now, across the state on average, 64.5% of our English speakers are proficient at their grade level in English language arts. Not a super high number to begin with, but for EBLs, that number is 14%. Those numbers are pretty much replicated in Wenatchee. In math, across the state on average, 53.3% of our English speakers are proficient at their grade level in math. Again, an aching chasm for EBLs learners, 15.8% proficient. In Wenatchee, English speakers are doing about the same as the state average, but EBLs in this community are doing worse, 8% proficiency. This last statistic might be the most troubling one because of its implications for the future, but let's look. Across the state on average, 82.2% of our English speakers are graduating from high school. By contrast, 64.2% of our EBLs are graduating from high school. Those numbers are pretty much the same in Wenatchee. But given the proficiency data that we just looked at, you have to wonder what kind of future these students are going on to. And for the students who didn't graduate, we know the future pretty much holds for them unemployment or severe underemployment, high risks for incarceration, high risks for ill health, and a lower life expectancy overall. So, what do we do about this? If we want them to do better in school, teaching English to our EBLs should not be our first priority. Now, the truth of the matter is we have to completely rethink how we integrate students who don't speak English into our schools. But that's another talk for another time. Right now, we could talk about potential solutions from a typical perspective. We could talk about principles of language acquisition, teaching strategies, the difference between academic and social English. But I'm an education innovation designer, so let's talk about what we can do for students and teachers in our schools right now, but we'll do it from a design perspective. Rule number 1 in user-centered design is empathy. Before any good designer goes out trying to make solutions for people, they try to get to know the people for whom those solutions are being designed. So what if we did that? What if we just talked to our students about what they actually need? What if we talked to our teachers about what's actually going on in their classrooms? So I did that. I went and talked to some teachers. I talked to some retired, some teaching right now, some in private schools, some in traditional public schools, some in public charter schools. And they told me things that I expected to hear, like there's just not enough time in the day to create well-differentiated learning for EBLs. And I can vouch for that. I sat in a 2-day workshop learning about differentiation strategies, and I came away thinking, that's really hard. And doing that in a 45-minute planning period is not really realistic. And as if time were not enough of a problem, then there's the matter of training. Only 24% of all the teacher prep programs in this country offer their teacher candidates any instruction on how to teach EBLs. But the one thing they all told me that they wish they had more of, more than time, more than training, all of the teachers told me they wish they had more confidence in their cultural literacy. Now, language barriers are hard enough. If you literally don't understand the person you're talking with, it's very hard to engage. It's hard to convey anything, instructions, a joke, let alone teach a subject like algebra. So if you're a teacher and there's a language barrier present, you're already one down. But it's more than language. It's race and culture. In Washington, 87.8% of our public school teachers are white, whereas 45.9% of our students are non-white. So imagine that you're a non-Muslim, and you're meeting your Muslim students' parents for the first time. You eagerly extend your hand to the man in the couple, and he doesn't take it. And if he's kind, like the man I extended my hand to not so long ago, he gently but politely explains he can't take your hand for cultural reasons. And now you're two down. You can imagine what this does to a teacher's sense of confidence, especially a young first-year teacher. It's hard to develop empowered, inspired relationships with your students and their families if you come into it feeling confused and embarrassed. Of course, we'd like all of our teachers to be culturally competent and confident, but what does this have to do with learning and outcomes? Well, actually, quite a lot. The research confirms what we all know intuitively. If you don't think you're going to be good at something, you probably won't. So in the classroom, what that means, if your teacher doesn't feel confident about reaching out to and teaching her EBL students, it will directly and significantly impact the students' academic outcomes. So if we want our teachers to do better with their students and students' families, building our teachers' capacity to connect with their EBLs should be our first priority. Now, I want to go back to design principles for a minute. Designers look at ways to shift behavior so they can shift outcomes. And they've shown time and again that small shifts can make big impacts. In 2005, IDEO, the design firm that popularized user-centered design, was hired by a large national bank to help them figure out how to encourage the customers to save more money. So using IDEO's user-centered design process, they learned that many customers round up the numbers in their checkbook to keep a little buffer in the account and, just make the numbers simple. Using this insight about behavior, the bank created a program called Keep the Change and invited their customers to take those rounded up numbers and put them straight into savings. Since they've launched that program in 2005, 12.3 million customers have enrolled, and collectively, they have saved over $2 billion. Small shift, big impact. So what if we did that? Could we nudge teacher and student behavior to get different outcomes? Is there an app for that? Well, I'm working on it, and I'm working on it with technology because here's the thing. There's 7,376 people in the Peace Corps, and if we drafted all of them to teach our EBLs, it wouldn't be enough. If we want to change the trajectory for millions of students, we're going to have to apply some technology. So, in this app that I'm working on called Global Voice, teachers will have profiles. This is a sample profile for a fictitious teacher. Tells her name, tells the app how many years she's been teaching, what subject she teaches, what her district's curriculum is, and a drop-down menu for her to learn more about her EBLs, who they are, what languages they speak, what their level of English proficiency is. She can also rate her confidence level in reaching out and teaching the students. Students will also have profiles in the app, and I chose a Spanish speaker because 2/3 of our EBLs are Spanish speakers. And it tells Nancy, his teacher, and the app some facts about him that the district systems may not know. That he loves soccer, that he likes science. He's got a dog named Cesar. He's got a 15-year-old sister named Alicia. He's not so keen on writing, and it gives us some sense of how strong his sense of cultural identification is. Now imagine that Nancy, his teacher, logged on because she saw Miguel's in her class and she wants to know a little bit more about Mexican-American culture. She can go to Culture Quick Facts, and it will give her a couple of links, one for how to say hello in Spanish, one for how to say goodbye in Spanish. It'll give her some culture norms for adults, culture norms for teens. It might tell her that 15-year-old girls in Mexican-American culture often get a big coming out party called a quinceañera. It'll tell her important holidays, major religions, and local events that might be of interest to the population here, like fiestas mexicanas here in Wenatchee. So what if the app prompted her to send a welcome message to Miguel and his parents in Spanish and English? We already have instant translation technology that can make that happen in a snap. A couple of clicks, and the whole relationship is off to a different start. Is face-to-face communication better? Of course it is. but it's not always possible. So is an auto-generated message better than nothing? Yes, it is. I worked with large public universities that were bringing adult learners back onto campus to finish their degrees. And they used auto-generated messages to welcome the students, point out resources on campus, encourage them during the semester. And they actually got replies to their auto-generated messages saying, "Thank you. I know it was auto-generated, but it still mattered. I felt welcomed. I appreciate it." Here's another idea for how to get students and teachers to build bonds faster. What if we could get them to do things that we know would help with language acquisition and relationship development, but they might not have thought of? So for example, we know that spending 5 minutes of one-to-one time with an EBL in conversation will help her acquire language faster. We know that teaching a student an idiom in English will help her acquire language faster. We also know that many EBLs are not that keen to practice their speaking skills with native English speakers. So how do we get them to do those things? In my app, I'm calling it Level Up, and it looks something like this. The app generates suggestions for both students and teachers along the lines of those things I just talked about. And it gives them points for doing those things. So if Nancy learns a new culture fact, she gets 20 points. If Miguel joins an after-school activity, he gets 20 points. And at the end of the week or the month, they can both cash in their points to get things that matter to them. For the teachers, it might be extra planning time. It might be classroom supplies or gift card. For the students, it might be extra free time at school, an extra item in the cafeteria, or some swag. Now I've got one more idea about how we can get teacher confidence up quickly. And this one might make you feel a little uncomfortable. It made me feel uncomfortable when I thought of it. But here's the thing. A lot of good ideas make people uncomfortable at the beginning. So stay with me. Every coach will tell you, athletic or professional, that the fastest way to improve your performance is to watch yourself work. I have been recorded as part of my professional training in almost every area that I've pursued. As a young attorney, I was videotaped by the Department of Justice's Training Institute. As a certification candidate for coaching, I was audio recorded, and I learned more from debriefing those painful tapes with master certified coaches and experienced trial lawyers than I ever did from a book or a class. So what if we put a remote coach in every classroom? What if we use the app to tell the camera to look for certain things? Like, how many times are the EBLs called on to participate? Do they look confused or disengaged? Did the teacher use that strategy to put students in pairs to work together? Or did she use a silent reflection strategy like her coach suggested? Our technology is good enough that we can tell, facial recognition can tell if somebody is confused or disengaged, things that the teacher might have just missed. It can tell the difference between a pair of people working together and people working individually, and it can certainly listen for specified periods of time. So how exactly would that work? The remote coaches would film a class during a lesson, and it would generate 2 products, a report and an EDSIC ticket. At the end, the teacher would get the report and would tell her, you called on the EBLs 50% of the time. 50% of them looked confused or disengaged. You did use the pair strategy. You did not use the silent reflection strategy. She can reflect on her own performance using that report as a guide, and then she can go on to the app and give it ratings and feedback. She can say, hey, that pair strategy, 5 stars, I'd do it again. Or the silent reflection strategy, no stars, but a comment box where she says, I ran out of time. She can also add her own questions and her own feedback. And then imagine that across the building, across the district, across the wider app community, those remote coaches are sourcing the feedback and the ratings, and they're pushing to the top the things that are working really well. And that aggregated data is bundled up and then given to the district's human coach, who can look at it and see the trends and spot the areas of struggle and strength. And now that one coach can have the reach of 50 coaches or more when he emails the entire science teacher block and says, hey, I see you're all trying that one strategy and it's not working so well. Try this in class next week instead. Or third grade teachers knocking it out of the park. Can I show some of your video to your colleagues so they can see what good teaching looks like? Now we're giving targeted, right-sized, relevant feedback to our teachers, many of them all at once. Now I know the idea of a camera in a classroom raises privacy concerns, and we can overcome them. We can use blurring, we can use audio-only options, we can use photo releases. The truth of the matter is that no one ever needs to see the film as long as the app is getting the ratings and the feedback. We can give control of the film completely to the teacher, and she can decide whether to use it. And we know if she does, it will have a profound impact on her performance. It only hurts to watch yourself on film once for a few minutes, and then you learn some really important, valuable things, like don't ever wear that sweater again. So I'm going to leave you now with a quote from the 6th president of Morehouse College, Benjamin E. Mays. He said, "The tragedy of life is often not in our failures, but in our complacency. Not in doing too much, but rather in doing too little. Not in living above our abilities, but rather below our capacities." We have to live up to our capacities as creative problem solvers so that all of our students can live up to their capacities. Thank you.